everybody, I am Liz, and it is the end of another month. April is over and I read a whopping 7 books, which is fantastic. It's the biggest reading month I've had this year, and I am super happy about it. I read a ton of books at the beginning, I read some thick books at its end for Topple, and now it's into May, and May is going to be an amazing month, not just hopefully for my reading, but also because I'm going to Scotland, and I'm so excited. I've never been out of the country before, and so this is going to be a different experience. It's going to be stressful, but it's also going to be super amazing. So I'm really excited to share with you what I've been reading in April and tell you my thoughts and feelings about each book. The first book I finished in April was A Land of Permanent Goodbyes by Atiwa Abawi. This is on the Syrian conflict as those that in Syria flee as refugees from Syria to Turkey and then from Turkey to Greece. It's narrated by Destiny and it was so sad. I sobbed throughout the first third of it constantly because it is so sad as our main character Tariq loses a majority of his family in an apartment bombing, and that's what prompts his father to take him and his little sister out of Syria and to flee as refugees. And I have really nothing negative to say about this book except for it is one of those stories that tells more than shows. For a majority of this book, as it's not in a first person or third person narrative in the sense of the main characters, it is Destiny observing these main characters, and so it's not quite the same as those showing type stories. So if that's not for you, then you might not enjoy this book as much as you might a different type of story. This was the debut novel of Atiwa Abawi, and she is also a Syrian refugee, so it has some Own Voices rep, and I honestly loved this story and just loved it so much. I would give it a 4 out of 5 stars only because of the telling, not showing aspect of the story. But I did love the narration. I loved the little quips of Destiny. I loved the journey that Tariq and his family take, and I was super sad by the realization of how hard their struggles and their travels would be. Next, I read The Speaker by Tracy Chee. This is the sequel, the second book in the Reader trilogy, and a lot of the things that happened with the first book carried on through this book as well, because our main character Sefia has magical abilities when she reads a book, and in this story she's really tapped into those abilities, so she doesn't necessarily have to be reading now to tap into those abilities. However, she still reads the book and it still gets into other people's pasts and other stories. However, I was much more invested in the stories of this book and how it tied all together with the main plot of the story. I was super happy, super thrilled, and I definitely preferred this book to the first story because everything made so much more sense going in, and the progression of the characters, the plot development, character development, everything was so fascinating and so interesting, and I'm definitely on it for the ride for the last and third book of the series. I definitely have to say that the story of Edward and Arcadaman Titano was probably almost took the cake over Sefia and Archer's story because I just loved it so much, and I hope to see its progression in the third book. This one definitely is a 4 out of 5 star read. Then I read When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi, and this book I knew was going to be sad, but by the end I was sobbing, ridiculously sobbing, because this story is an autobiography of Paul's life where he is in his last year of neurosurgery residency and he gets diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. He doesn't know how long he's going to live, so he just starts writing. And oh, it is so heartbreaking. But I also loved so much of this book because I am also in the medical field, and so I related to a lot of stuff that he was writing about. And he's a really good writer. This is one of my favorite books of the month. It is a 5 out of 5 star read. It is amazing, and I just loved it just so much. Now, this month was really a topic of really sad books because a lot of the books I read had really sad subject matter, and the next book I finished was definitely no different from that, and that's Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson. This book, our main character, Melinda, she's starting high school for the first time, and something happened to her where she really doesn't want to speak. She feels like her words and her life has really been taken from her, and she really is not motivated to be in school. She's not motivated to do anything, to talk to her parents, to talk to anybody, to make friends. She feels very alone, and the only place that she really finds refuge is in her art class. And it just takes you through this journey of her first year in high school. It was just such a heartbreaking story, and I loved it so much. I wish that the narration was slightly different because this book is definitely makes you feel like it was written by a 15-year-old. So it is mostly about her thoughts and how she communicates with other people. There's not a whole lot of like plot and background development, and there's not a lot of descriptions. And I wish I really wanted more of that. I understand why it was narrated and written the way it was, but at the same time I wanted a little bit more from the writing. And so this is another 4 out of 5 star read. The next book I read that kind of differs from these sad stories is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline Engel. I was very interested in reading this story before I watched the movie, and it was definitely not what I expected it to be. We have our main character, Meg, who's the oddball of the family. She's just very average, where all of her other family members are more extraordinary. And her father's been missing for several years, and she meets these 3 really interesting people that are going to take her to go and find her father, and they go on this intergalactic journey and meet very strange creatures and species and different types of societies. It was very interesting, and I definitely enjoyed a lot of this book. However, it was just childish for me, and I don't know if I really got what I wanted out of this story. I don't know if it really gripped me enough to continue on with the series, and I just really want to look at this fondly and give this a I enjoyed it rating. I can't really give it a star rating because, like I said, it was childish and not quite for me, but I did enjoy a lot of the book, and so I'm not quite sure what to give it as a rating exactly, and so I'm not gonna quite give it a rating. The next book I finished was something that did emotionally wreck me by the end, and that is Heartless by Marissa Meyer. It is an origin story for the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland, and I should have realized that it was going to be sad because something awful has to happen to turn someone into a spiteful, off with their head person, but I didn't expect this, and it tore me up inside. I loved so much of this book. It messed with my emotions. I was happy and feeling for Kath as she's going about her dreams of trying to convince her parents that she wants to create a bakery. She wants to be a baker, and she doesn't want to marry the king, and everything just happens and gets torn away from her, and it was just an intense read. It made me mad, it made me sad, it made me happy, and it just gave me so many emotions. The narration, the audiobook that I listened to was phenomenal, and I just absolutely adored this book. This is tied with When Breath Becomes Air as my favorite read of the month, and this one also gets a 5 out of 5 stars. The last book I finished, I read specifically for the tome Topple, and that was Impulse by Ellen Hopkins. This is the first book in her series of other sad forms of stories, and this one takes place where 3 of our main characters are in a mental institution because all 3 of them have attempted suicide, and their families put them in there to try to bring them to recovery, to try to make them not want to kill themselves and want to move on and have a future. And it was really interesting. It's told in verse, so it's not typical book format, but it still gave me a great setting, great character thoughts and motivations, character development, plot development. Everything was in there, even though it was told in a form of poetry, and each character had its own poetic form, which was very interesting. I definitely really enjoyed and loved this story. The only thing that irked me were character perceptions on certain topics, and that's not to say that the author had those perceptions, because it was kind of talked about in a way to draw attention to these harmful ideologies. And so I definitely really enjoyed this story. I know I'm going to read more of Ellen Hopkins' works, especially because everyone tells me to now read Crank. So I really enjoyed this book. This is another one where I had to take a breather after reading it because it ends on a very sad note that I wasn't expecting, and I still really enjoyed it. This is at least a 4.5 out of 5 stars. And so there we have the amazing 7 books I finished in April. So now we're going to talk about some books that I'm currently reading for May. And right now the only book I am reading is The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. I wanted to finish this book in April so I could jump into The Lord of the Rings. It didn't happen. I took a break from reading it because it was just, I wasn't feeling it, because it's very dense and it's a lot of map building and character building, but it's not a plot-driven story. It's just an anthology. It's really, it reads a lot like the Bible, and it's not something I typically read. I know I need it for the source and the background information before going into The Lord of the Rings, so I'm definitely going to continue on. It's just going to take me longer to read it than I had anticipated. Now I'm going to reach out to you guys to pick a book for me to read this month, this May. Give me a recommendation on very scenic books that really talk about a culture, a country that's really different from something that I'm used to in America. That's kind of what I want to focus in my reading this May, is just reading about different cultures. So to start off with these culture type books, I have picked 2 from my shelf, and I'll let you vote down below on which one you would prefer me to read. So the first book I have is Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys. This one takes place in Lithuania and Siberia, as our main character, Lena, is separated from her family. Her mother and brother are taken by the Soviet secret police. Her father is in a prison camp, and she wants to unite her family, find them, and bring them together. She leaves drawings behind as clues for where she is in hopes that it reaches her family. I've heard that it's very specific with Lithuanian and Soviet culture, and so it's definitely going to be an immersive book that I have had on my TBR for quite some time. The next book I have is The Map of Salt and Stars by Jennifer Zenab Jokader, and I could have said her name wrong. I'm sorry if I did. This one is about a girl named Noor who leaves New York City when her father dies to join her mother in Syria when the bombs in Syria from the Syrian conflict start. So she takes this journey and escapes as refugee through the Middle East and also Northern Africa, and she's really just trying to find safety, and the path she takes is very similar to the path of a 12th century map maker. And so it tells both people's stories from the centuries and weaves them together in this really fantastic Syrian, Middle Eastern, Northern Africa, like culture-esque type story. So please let me know in the comments down below which one you think I should read this month. And so there we have the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you leave some amazing comments down below about what you read in April, about what you think about the books I've read if you've read them, and also just give me some recommendations following books on specific cultures different than mine. And I hope you stick around on my channel and see that I post videos every Tuesday and Friday. You can be notified by subscribing and hitting the bell to notify when I post videos. I hope you liked this video by giving it a thumbs up, and that you will watch more of my videos on my channel. So until next time, I love you guys. Bye!